there! Let's talk supplies. So one of the greatest things about cross-stitching is it's super cheap. Even if you want to buy all kinds of stuff available out there, you won't spend nearly as much money as you would need to even start some of the hobbies. So I'm gonna break this down into 3 categories: necessities, nice to haves, and my not so necessary favs. Okay, so let's dive in! So you really only need 3 things to start, and first of them is a needle. You can use a regular embroidery needle that you probably already have at home. I'd suggest at least dulling it so you don't stab yourself too hard. Cross-stitching needles are pretty cheap though, so if you need to buy other stuff that I will talk about in a moment, then I would suggest buying them also. They are made very dull, they have rounded tip, and they are easy to thread, especially if you use more than one strand of a floss. You probably will. So if you do buy them, then I would suggest getting a set of different sizes in case you will use different densities canvas in the future. So the second thing is embroidery floss. You can actually start with just one color of the floss, but I would suggest getting at least basic colors. The most popular brand is DMC, and it's a really high quality floss, and it is affordable, but back when I started I got some random brands floss and it was okay too. I actually still have some of it and I use it with no problems at all. If you have some things that you want to stitch already in mind, then I would suggest getting through them and looking at what colors you will need and ordering them so you don't have to go to a store every time before starting a new project. Also, all the projects tell you exactly what colors you will need, but unless it's something very specific and getting the exact color is crucial, you can use whatever colors you already have, because it doesn't really matter if some flowers or birds in the framing that you're cross-stitching are the exact color as at the original pattern. What I mean is, you don't need to spend $100 to get 200 colors or something. You just need to buy a pack of 10 or maybe 20 flosses and you will be good to go. The only color that you really need to make sure you have is black. And the third and the last really necessary thing is canvas. A cross-stitching canvas is called Aida, and you really need to use that because it's kind of a mesh fabric that makes all your crosses the same size, and it's all that cross-stitching is about. So Aida comes in different densities, and the most popular one from what I've seen on patterns and books is 14 count, which basically means you get 14 stitches per inch. So like I said, most of the patterns and books give you the size of the pattern for that count Aida. Also, it's just a nice one because it's big enough for cross-stitching to be comfortable, but at the same time it's small enough for the final product to not be huge, so I think it's a good balance. Also, Aida comes in different colors, more about it later, but you probably want to start with white as it will work with most of the patterns. Okay, so now nice to haves. They are not necessary, but they will make your life a lot easier, so I would suggest buying them. They are not really expensive, and the first thing is embroidery hoop. So you can stitch without it, and at the beginning I didn't want to use it because I only wanted to make some really small patterns, and so I didn't think it would make much of a difference, but it does. The fabric doesn't get in the way and it's just easier to hold. So I would suggest buying at least one basic hoop, maybe something like that. And the size of it depends on what you want to stitch. So maybe just look through the projects that you have in mind and just buy a hoop that would fit them. Of course, you can buy a smaller one and move it as you stitch so it fits different parts of the project, but unless you want to stitch something really big, it's really more convenient to just get a hoop that will fit the whole thing. Another thing is small scissors. So I didn't talk about scissors in the necessities parts because I assume that everyone wants a pair of some kind. So you can use whatever you have for cutting both canvas if needed and the floss. But if you can, then I would suggest buying a tiny pair specifically for cutting a floss. It's a lot more practical as you can cut as close to the canvas as you need. And another thing is a needle threader. You can buy a basic needle threader at any sewing supply store, and believe me, you want one. Threading with an embroidery floss is a lot more frustrating than with a regular thread because you use more than one strand and sometimes every one of them wants to live its own life. Okay, so now my favs. So they are not necessary by any means, and back when I started I didn't even know things like that exist, but some of them makes cross-stitching a lot more fun, some of them make it even more easy, so I thought maybe you would consider getting them. So the first thing is crazy color canvas. So what I do nowadays is I buy big pieces of what I use the most, which is white and black 14 count canvas, and they last me very long. And I buy smaller pieces of whatever interesting I see. I recently saw that navy blue one, so I got it thinking about making some galaxy themed project. I also have some looking like a tie-dye, and the great thing about them is they make really simple project a lot more interesting. So with a colored canvas you can give any pattern your own twist. I really like to use the black one, to be honest. Look how it's changed the vibe of that particular pattern. Another thing is non-standard floss. So I realized there are some special embroidery flosses quite recently and I fell in love with them. My favorites are those ombre ones. I really like to use them to make ombre text and it turns out really pretty with actually zero special effort. Also, there are fluorescent ones and golden and silver. I don't really use them, but just so you know they exist and you can really step up your cross-stitching game with them. Next we have rectangular embroidery hoops. I got mine from AliExpress because I couldn't find them anywhere in my country, and to be honest, I mostly use them instead of regular embroidery hoops because I mostly just stitch rectangular patterns. So when you use a hoop that is closer in both shape and size to your project, you don't have to waste canvas just to fit it in your hoop. I'm a cheap bitch and I hate wasting supplies even though they are so affordable. And another one is a cross-stitching needle threader. So the threaders I already talked about do their job, but with cross-stitching they won't last you very long because you will have to put some force on them while threading your needle. I broke quite a few before I discovered there are threaders specifically for cross-stitching, and they are a bit pricier, but they're unbreakable and actually even easier to use. There are different kinds of them, but they're all metal without a wire like in a regular threader, so it's actually nothing to break in them. And the next one is floss storage system and bobbins. So embroidery floss comes in small skeins, and at the beginning I stored it just like that, but when you get more colors it becomes annoying to dig in them and you can't really properly see what colors you have. So what I prefer now is rewinding them to bobbins. I got a DMC box with bobbins and winder, and it took me a while to rewind all of them, although my collection is still not that big. But right now it's just a lot more convenient and I see them all, so I don't accidentally buy colors I already have, and picking colors for a project is a lot more pleasing now. Also, the place I buy floss online from rewinds it for me for a very small price, like 4 cents per skein or something, and so I only have to use the winder now when I sometimes buy a single skein I need at my local store. And the last thing is kind of a bonus, but I really consider it cross-stitching supply now. I mean frames. Cheap frames, to be specific. You want to have a collection of frames, especially if you post your work online and you don't want to spend a big money on it. Most of them I will not display at my home simply because they just don't go with my home style, so I didn't see the point to invest in high quality frames. I have quite a few now, and most of them were between $1 to $3. They're all photo frames and I bought them at cheap home decor stores. I check what they have every time I'm at that kind of a store. You can also find some very interesting frames secondhand, so if you want to show off your work and you don't want to spend big money on that, consider looking for some cheap frames. Okay, that's all. These are literally all the supplies that I use, and I don't feel I need to buy anything else right now, so it kind of proves the point that cross-stitching really is a cheap hobby. I plan on making a video about my favorite pattern sources and also my favorite things that I cross-stitch, so if you want to see it, hit the thumbs up and consider subscribing so you don't miss it. And I think that's it for today, so see you in the next one. Bye!